Hey gang, we are in Spring Valley, Illinois. In Boone County, we're just outside Rockford to the east, and actually we're just north of where Blood's Point Cemetery is, the same general area. We're visiting another cemetery here, and that cemetery is called Spring Valley. And we've got a really kind of a crazy story here that goes back to the 1800s. There's a man here, a victim, who was poisoned by his wife and a mad doctor. His name was Dr. Cream. Very famous story, and we're going to talk about it. Want to give a shout out to Matt McGee, who led me here, who watched the Blood's Point Cemetery premiere, and guess what? We are in. Okay, we're going to talk about this story. It's crazy, and it's a long story, but we have time to do it because there's a lot of old gravestones here. I did come and scope this out. There's one gravestone. There's one gravestone where the man was born 1 year in 1777, 1 year after America declared independence. Holy cow. I think that's the oldest. I can't say it's the oldest grave that I've seen, but it's the oldest man. The oldest man's grave that I've seen. I can say that. I'm going to tell the story, and I will just point at the stones for you to read. And there's some good ones here, guys. There are some really good ones. But I got a lot to tell you. Dr. Thomas Neill Cream. Cream like ice cream. Yes. Some of you may know the story of the man with the top hat, or the tall hat, or the cylinder hat. There's a lot of names for it. But he was born in Glasgow, and he was raised outside Quebec City in Canada after his family moved there in 1854. He attended McGill University in Montreal, and he graduated with a degree in 1876. And guess what his thesis was? Chloroform. You know what chloroform is? Chloroform is an anesthetic, and it has a dubious past. That's the stuff you would see where the bad guys would take the rag and chloroform the woman, take her away, knock her. It basically knocks you out. And I guess in high enough doses, it'll kill you. So that was his MO. He went for postgraduate work in a hospital in London. He went back to London, and in 1878 he became a physician and a surgeon in Edinburgh. He came back to Canada to practice, and he went to, oddly enough, London, Ontario. He was having a relationship with a woman named Flora Brooks, and she got pregnant, and they both did not want the baby. So he aborted the baby, and when he aborted the baby, he almost killed her. Now, her father decided that after that, he was really mad. Now, what would you do? Wouldn't you tell your daughter to go away, or wouldn't you try to kill that guy? No, he said, "You need to marry my daughter." So they had a shotgun wedding, no pun, and they were married. Well, anyway, she died of consumption, tuberculosis, in 1877, shortly thereafter, and of course he would be blamed later. I don't know how you fake that one. You got tuberculosis, you got tuberculosis. But in any respect, in 1879, Kate Gardner would be a woman that he would allege to have had an affair with, and she was found dead in an alleyway behind Crean's office, pregnant and poisoned by chloroform. Quite interesting. He claimed that she had been made pregnant by a prominent local businessman, but after being accused of both murder and blackmail, that's when he fled to the United States. And this, you're going to see a pattern with this, what we're talking about. By the way, here are the tombstones that I was talking about. We have a husband and wife, William Ames and Polly Ames. Polly died in August of 1854. She was 71 years old. And this is very clear. The sun's coming in and out. The sun was at a good angle. I didn't bring my flashlight on this one, gang, but should be okay once this cloud goes by. But you can really read this one. William, you can see here, died April 4th, 1840. He was 63. It says in the 63 year of his age. I should say 63rd, I guess, but in those days. But do the math, that's 1777. Wow. Probably the first pioneer in this area. There's a lot of other old graves here. So on with the story. So now he ends up in Chicago. And he establishes a practice in the red light district downtown. And he was basically working on doing abortions in the red light district on prostitutes. Isn't that commendable? And shortly thereafter, in August of 1880, he was investigated after the death of Mary Ann Faulkner, a woman on whom he had allegedly operated on, but he escaped prosecution on that one due to lack of evidence. On it goes. December 1880, another patient, a Miss Stock, died by treatment from Mr. Cream, Dr. Cream, and he subsequently attempted to blackmail a pharmacist who had filled the actual prescription of the drugs that were poisoned or mixed in to poison her. And this is going to be a pattern you're going to see. We're going to hear about this guy. Pretty stupid pattern. Well, it backfired on him. He got in trouble for that. And in 1881, a woman named Alice Montgomery died of strychnine poisoning, following an abortion. And that was ruled a murder, but that was never solved. Again, evidence. Dr. Cream, likely a suspect. He was also involved now in making epilepsy cures. And basically you would mix the strychnine. If you take very, very small doses of strychnine, and you would put them in gel like pills, it would actually help epilepsy, I guess. It would keep the seizures down. Very, very small. Very small. But that was kind of a perfect cover for him. So he started doing a treatment here on a guy named Daniel Stott, who were in Prairie Grove. I mean, we're way outside Chicago. Him and his wife Julia would take the train downtown to see the doctor. And the treatment seemed to be working, But then shortly thereafter, she started going alone downtown to get the drugs. And the next thing you know, they're having an affair. She's buying dresses, she's being wined and dined, and then she'd come back on the train. So she decided that her fat and out-of-shape husband, Daniel, needed to go. Now look at this. This is just a giant boulder with other rocks cemented onto it. Kind of a homemade family plot marker. Interesting. So the affair is going on, and Daniel's getting the medication, but he starts catching on to the affair. And whether it was Julia or both Julia and Dr. Cream, I'm sure they both were in on it. They just started increasing the dosages. All of a sudden, bam. And it began to work. Now, small doses of strychnine, not bad. But when you start increasing these levels, these guys would have, and women, if you got poisoned with strychnine, you would have seizures, you double over, you go into convulsions, you start throwing up. Many times they'd choke on their own vomit and die. It was a horrible death. And Daniel died, not surprisingly. Now, if everybody would have just kept their mouth shut, then it wouldn't have been a big problem. But, you know, Dr. Cream, who, by the way, wasn't even there. He wasn't even there. So what does Dr. Cream do? He goes, oh, this is an opportunity maybe to make some cash, I guess. So he writes to the coroner blaming the pharmacist for the death. After he, again here, we're into this blackmail thing. It didn't work. This time Cream was arrested along with Julia. And what does Julia do? She turns state evidence to avoid jail. She blames everything on Dr. Cream. So, not a smart guy. He was sentenced to life in prison. And you would have thought that was the end of the story, but no, he has good behavior. He's released in July of 1891. Governor Pfeiffer had commuted his sentence because his brother was pleading for leniency, but more likely they were being bribed. There was some bribery going on. So did Dr. Cream stop? No! He continued his action. Now, he had just inherited a whole bunch of money from his father who passed away. So he went to get the money in London. And actually, this was about the time of the Jack the Ripper killings. It was actually after the Jack the Ripper killings. But it was around that time period when all that went down. So he ended up going to London, and he took lodgings at this place called Lambeth, which was riddled with poverty, petty crime, and prostitution. And on October 13th, 1891, we have Ellen Nellie Donworth, a 19-year-old prostitute, who accepted a drink with Dr. Cream, got severely ill the next day, and died on October 16th from strychnine poisoning. Well, during the inquest, Dr. Cream wrote to the coroner offering the name of the murderer in return for a whole bunch of money. Here we go again. And he also wrote that the owner of the books, I think it was a bookstore, it was a neighbor, he accused him of murder, and he went to him and he demanded money, like ransom for silence. So after all that, on October 20th, he met with a 27-year-old prostitute named Matilda Clover. And it was the same thing. She got ill. Same kind of poisoning. She goes down. Died the next morning. And they're all like, she died of alcoholism. But what did Dr. Cream do? No. This is another way to make money. He goes to a prominent physician, Dr. William Broadbent, accusing him of poisoning Matilda and demanding cash. So what does Broadbent do? Broadbent goes to Scotland Yard. He's like, no, I'm not going for this. So all this kind of stuff happens, and in the end, he's just killing these prostitutes and playing these ransom games. And through these accusatory letters, he just was drawing more and more attention to himself. So not long afterward, Cream met a policeman from New York City. And I guess they were kind of friends, and he was visiting London. They were calling it now the Lambeth Poisoner. And Cream was giving him a brief tour. He's like, hey, I know where a lot of this stuff happened. And the policeman was like, yeah, show me. That sounds really interesting. So he takes him on the tour, and he thinks he's, a real smart guy. And the policeman's like, hey, this is kind of strange. This guy knows a lot. So he talks to his counterparts there in London. I guess it's Scotland Yard, whatever. And they're comparing notes, and they're like, maybe this guy's been doing all these. Maybe he's the poisoner that we've been looking for, right? Maybe. So they put him under surveillance, and they noticed his habit of visiting prostitutes. And on June 3rd, 1982, he was arrested. He was arrested for one of the girls, Matilda Clover, and on July 13th, he was formally charged. And from the start, he denied everything. Now, this would actually be his undoing, this trial, which lasted from October 17th to the 21st, 1892, and it only took the jury 12 minutes to find him guilty. And of course, the judge sentenced him to death, and less than a month after his conviction, on November 15th, Cream was hanged at the gallows at Newgate Prison. Oh, I want to go there, by the way. And as customary with all of those criminals, his body was buried the same day in an unmarked grave within the prison walls. So you won't probably be finding Dr. Cream, at least anytime soon. Now, what's interesting was part of we'll say the lore and the legend is that as he was being hanged, as the trap door, or as he was pushed, maybe back then, I think they had the trap door, as he was literally about to go through, he said, I am, and as it went down, he said, Jack. So that's, inferring, I am Jack the Ripper. But one of the historians recently, I did a lot of research on this, she did some basic research that surprisingly no one has done before. She's from London and discovered that she checked the records at Old Bailey, is it, and found that Cream was in prison the whole time. He was in prison the whole time that Jack the Ripper did his thing. So even in death, this Dr. Cream, narcissist to the end, he wanted to take credit. Now here is the grave of Daniel Stott, And we see here June, I think it's June 12, 1881. And what's interesting is what it says at the bottom is you can read, poisoned by his wife and Dr. Cream. That is the famous inscription on the tombstone. So, was he Jack the Ripper? Or was he not Jack the Ripper? I don't think so. But it's kind of cool to wonder about. But the man in the top hat, the big top hat, those, when I see those hats, they're interesting, but they're kind of like shadowy figures. I don't know. I know Abe Lincoln wore it, but anyway. Daniel Stott, rest in peace. And we'll see you guys on the next adventure.